Welcome to the Gambia. This is where we call the land of smiling coast. Hello viewers, welcome to another edition of Reew. This is the show where we look into reasons why people are leaving the West and coming back to Africa. As the name suggests, it means Reew. It means you believe in your country, you have hope for your country, and that's why you are coming. As you have seen in our previous episodes, every week we have a guest, and every guest has his own story. No two stories are different, even though it's the same theme, people leaving Europe or America to come back to Africa, yet still everyone we talk to has a different story. Their stories are unique. And today we have a very special guest, and I can assure you that his story will keep you motivated. It will keep you glued to what we have to say. I'll not give you too much. I'll let him introduce himself. You can follow us as we go along.
Thank you, Parliament. My name is Babagale Jallo. I am the Executive Secretary of the TRRC right now.
Okay, as we can see today, we have Mr. Jallo here. Babagale Jallo is a household name in the Gambia. If you live in the Gambia, you know him. If you watch the TRRC, you have seen him. As he has rightly said, he is the Executive Secretary for the TRRC. Mr. Jallo is a Gambian, born and raised. He lived here, he worked here, but he did move out of Gambia. He moved went to the US. He lived in the US. He studied there. He was teaching. Like most people on this show, he lived a comfortable life there. He could have continued staying in the US, but he decided to come back home. So I think today that is what we are going to explore. But before we ask you, Mr. Jallo, why you decided to leave the good things in the West and come back home in the Gambia where we face a lot of challenges, I first want you to give people a background information about you. I know people see you, but they don't really know who you are. So we want the audience to know who you are. And you are an author. You've recently released a book which talks about your childhood growing up in Chakubantang, which is Farafenye. So we would like you to tell us who is Babagale Jallo, you know, where were you born, what was life for you growing up, a basic summary of your book and you growing up in the Gambia and in Chakubantang.
Well, thank you, Parliament. Yes, I was born in Farafenye and raised in Farafenye, and I did my childhood days in Farafenye, which is the original name of Farafenye is Chakubantang. So just recently, I wrote a book about my childhood days, and essentially what I did is just recall some of the memories that childhood days memories that I still have in my mind, so that my children and other children can learn about how childhood was like at some point. But I also wanted to highlight some of the challenges that I had as a child growing up, because I was the first person to go to school in my family, and my dad did not like school at all. He thought that if you go to school, you were going to become a kafir and start drinking alcohol. And incidentally, I was in love with reading. You know, I love reading. I just love reading from the very beginning. And he thought that my liking for reading was because I hated helping him at the market. He used to sell fish, my dad. And so he had to pull me out of school, like, I don't know how many times, every year, maybe twice, 3 times. And at some point, he pulled me out for a long time. And during that period, I wrote a book, just a series of short stories that I took to the headmaster of the secondary school, Mr. James Alkali Gay. And he took me back into school. He convinced my dad to take me back into school, and I haven't looked back since. So essentially, the book is a summary of my childhood experiences, but also a way of preserving the fact that, you know, some of us, we are not as lucky as others. We had kids whose parents encouraged them to go to school, and if you do well, they buy you a bicycle or kill a sheep for you, and so on and so forth. I used to do very well. I used to take first in my class, but like my dad wasn't interested at all. So essentially, that's what the book is about. So I did my childhood days in Farafenye, and eventually I went to Armitage High School I did my O-levels, then to Gambia High School, where I did my sixth form, and I was the head boy of Gambia High School. And then from there, I proceeded to Forabe College in Sierra Leone, came back, became a journalist, and eventually ran into trouble with the previous government because of my writings as a journalist. And eventually, I was arrested several times, detained by the NIA, Serious Crime Unit. Eventually, I had to leave the country because they even questioned the nationality of my parents. They arrested my parents, interrogated them because of my writings, and eventually I had to leave. So I went to the US and pursued higher education. Did my master's at Rutgers University in New Jersey and did my PhD at the University of California at Davis. And then I taught at 2 universities before I came back. So in summary, that would be, kind of a synopsis of my experiences.
Okay. Okay, we will come back to your later part in Gambia. I would like to revisit. We would not want to give everything away about your childhood because we want people to go out there and get your book and read it so they can understand exactly. But I just want to ask you, what was the best part? I know you've highlighted the challenges you faced, loving school and your parents saying, no, school is not for you. What was the best part of growing up in Farafenni, and what was the worst part of growing up in Farafenni?
Well, that's a difficult question. It sounds easy, but it's difficult. I would say the best part of childhood is everything that I experienced. Going out to play with my friends. Going out hunting, going out swimming. Going out running after teasing the nars at the market, and going out swimming, going out bird hunting. And I don't want to say this, but, running after the girls, small girls. We were very small, so nothing bad happened at that point. Going to the cinema, going to the bal pousser, and reading, So it was a very fun childhood. I wouldn't say they were my worst parts, or the worst parts of my childhood days, but struggling to stay in school was a very, very, very challenging experience for me because all I wanted to do was go to school. And all my dad wanted to do was keep me out of school. So that struggle was really a very, very difficult experience. I'm thankful to God and to the good people that I dedicated this book to. If you look at the dedication, I mentioned a number of names, who were able to convince my father to return me to school over and over and over again. Eventually, I escaped and went to high school, and that was it. So the best parts were everything I did as a child, and being with my mom, who passed away when I was in exile. And the worst part was really trying to stay in school, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we thank God and the people that encourage your dad to let you go to school, and of course your dad who eventually let you go to school, because without that we wouldn't be enjoying your writings. I have always been a follower of your writings. I think one of my favorite things that you did was the cartoons that you did with the Daily Observer.
Yes,
Story of the week. You had some cartoons, and I think those were very educative and very captivating. And if anybody knows you from back then, they would know you as a person or as a journalist who always advocated for the rights of the peoples. A journalist who always, wanted to see the best for the people. And I believe that is what landed you into a lot of troubles with the previous government, because you were speaking for the people. You were saying things that people were generally scared to say. You were trying. Can you tell us a little bit about that? How did that happen? When did the problem start? And how did you eventually end up being exiled?
Well, yes, that's right, because I used to write satirical stories. Remember Alaji Samba Yero Peacock and characters. I would write stories. When I was working at the Exams Council, West African Exams Council, that's where I worked after I graduated. I was an assistant registrar there, and I wrote for the Observer the Story of the Week, which was a satiric column that mocked, corruption and all kinds of vices in society. And because I was writing at the Observer and I refused to stop, I was sacked from my job at work. So I was sacked on a Friday, and on Monday I started at the Observer because they were even trying to pull me. And I started getting into trouble with the authorities when Mr. Best was deported, and the Ghanaian editor who took over from him, Mr. Ellicott, was also deported, and I became the editor-in-chief of the Observer. I started there as assistant editor. And of course, like you said, we can't compromise over the truth and the rights of the people. It was the same thing then, is the same thing now. I think I'm even more determined to defend my right and your right and everybody's rights to freedom of expression and everything that the government should be doing for people. So it was the editorials and the stories that we wrote and published in the Observer that landed me in trouble with the government over and over and over and over again. So I would leave home not knowing if I would come back home in the evening, because they would just come from nowhere and say, come with us. So at some point, Amadou Samba bought the paper on behalf of Baba Diop and Yaya Jammeh, the Observer, when I was editor-in-chief. And the first thing they did was sack D.A. Jao, who was the news editor and who ran a column called Focus, in which he criticized the government. So at that point, when they bought the paper, Amadou Samba called me into his office with Seriang Cisse, the new managing director, and he said, well, Baba, Mr. Best, you come highly, how do you call it, highly recommended by Mr. Best. So we want you to stay on. I will give you a car. Benz 280 actually sold me the car. I'll give you 100% salary increment from right now, and I'll give you a house. Amadou Samba said this, he is around. I don't tell lies. Well, not in public, maybe in private, yes, but I can't tell lies in public. So he gave me all of these promises. He said, I'll give you a car, I'll give you a 100% salary increment, and I'll give you a house. But we want you to stay. But I knew it was a trap. They wanted to destroy my reputation and integrity as a journalist. And I was lucky that they were planning to sack D.A. Jao. And D.A. Jao knows this story very well. And I said, if you sack D.A. Jao, I'm leaving. So for some reason, they thought I was bluffing, because how can you leave a car, you poor boy, coming from the village? How can you leave a car, a house, and 100% salary increment? I was getting about 4,000 something, so I would have hit maybe $9,000 per month as a young guy, very little responsibilities. And in Gambia of those days, you're talking about 1997 to 1998. So they went ahead and sacked D.A. Jao on a Sunday, and on Monday I tendered my resignation and left, and then started the independent newspaper. And because I started the independent newspaper, the regime thought I was trying to challenge them. And of course, the harassment, the arrest continued. And eventually, they said I wasn't a Gambian because I'm Fulani. So they said he's not a Gambian. They went to Farafenni and arrested my parents and interrogated them for a whole day. But eventually, they were released. And after that, I just thought that it was time to leave the country. That was in 2000, the year 2000. So around April, May 2000 is when they started questioning my nationality and arresting my parents. And so in September 2000, I just left the country and went to the US. Yeah, and I was in exile for 17 years before I came back.
Wow, 17 years away from your country, yes, facing harassments and all this, even to the extent of your parents. And then you still decide to come back. So don't go away. We'll take our first break, and then when we come back, we'll talk about Mr. Jallo's life in the US, and then most importantly, why he decided to come back after facing all these difficult challenges. He is here now with us. So please come back after the break. Welcome to the Gambia. This is where we call the land of smiling coast. welcome back. We stopped in the year 2000, and that was the year that Mr. Jallow left the Gambia and went to the US because of all the harassment and all the arrests that he was facing. I would like to ask you, this is your first no, you've said you studied in Sierra Leone, so you have traveled outside the Gambia, but this was your first time in the US. Going to the US, different country, different culture. What was life like in the US? The beginning, the middle, all the way to the end?
Well, it wasn't easy. Not one single moment. The US is not friendly to Africans or to black people in general. So I don't glorify the US. I think it's a country where you can make your life, you have opportunities, but it's a country where you live in stress as an African because it's your skin color that defines you in America, your skin color. It doesn't matter whether you have a PhD or you are anything, a garbage man. If you are white, you are white. If you are black, you are black. So it wasn't easy, but then I went to the US in 2000. I was lucky. I actually was hosted for some time by your sister, my good friend, Mam Yasin Sar. He hosted me, and David hosted me at their college. I'm forgetting the name of the Berea College. Berea College in Kentucky, because I went straight to Nashville, and they heard I was there. They invited me over to Berea, and I stayed with them for a few days, got my driver's license from there, and then went over to Washington, D.C. to work with allafrica.com. As soon as I got my papers, I filed for asylum, of course. I had a ton of evidence that I was being arrested and so on and so forth. So my asylum was very easy, if you like. So I went to Rutgers University, did my master's degree in liberal studies, applied to Howard University's African Studies program. They have a PhD program. I was admitted to the program. I did 1 year there, and then transferred to the University of California at Davis and completed my PhD in African history. And after that, I taught at Creighton University in Omaha for 3-4 years as a African history professor, and then was transferred to LaSalle University. I transferred there because they paid better. So I transferred back to Philly and taught African and world history at LaSalle University until my return here in December 2017.
Okay, you've just given us your educational background in the US. So it seems like the whole time you were in the US, you were with academics. You went, did your master's. From your master's, you went and you did your PhD. From your PhD, you started teaching. You taught in Nebraska, Omaha, and then you also taught at LaSalle. That was the academic part. I want to know what life was like in the US for you outside school.
Well, honestly, I don't think I had a life outside of academia. I was just focused on studying and getting my degrees and working. But if you wanted to know if I went to the store or if I was just outside.
And how did you adjust with the culture? Because it's a culture shock when you live here and you go there and it's a different culture.
I never adjusted. I never adjusted because to have adjusted perhaps would have meant trying to change my accent. For one thing, I refused to do that. And you just couldn't adjust to, I lived in a community. I grew up in a community where people were people, human beings. They behave like human beings. If your neighbor, you say hi to them in the morning, right? You're working with someone in an office, in the morning you say hi. In the US, they don't do that. A lot of people don't do that. I mean, it doesn't matter if you are neighbors for 10 years. Sometimes you are neighbors for 10 years and you don't even know your neighbor's name. You don't say hi. They don't say hi to people. People are automated. They have been mechanized. They have been, if you like, dehumanized. A lot of people, not all of them, but you say hi to people in the streets and they look at you like crazy.
Suspicious.
Yes, I mean, it's a very inhuman society, if you like. People have been turned almost to machines. It's very, very stressful. Everyone is stressed out and angry. You wonder at all the killings that happen day in and day out. It's everywhere. People are stressed out. People don't treat each other as human beings. They treat each other as objects. So outside of the work environment, you go outside, even though you have a PhD, you know, you are a university professor, you go into a store, and the store clerk would be following you around to see if you would steal something, just because you are black, you know? So it's a very frustrating environment. It was a very frustrating experience, stressful experience for me. Throughout, I just stayed there because I couldn't come home. And I couldn't come home because if I came home, the junglers would kill me. So I had to do my field research in Ghana. Ghana was my second home. So every summer I went to Ghana. That was a relief. You know, I got grants from my university to go to Ghana and do research for my PhD, and after my PhD to do research for the publications that you have to do in American academia if you wanted to make any headway. Yeah, so life wasn't very good in America in general. You don't make lots of money in academia, and you pay tons of taxes. You know, they don't care if you are poor or not. You have to pay the rent and the bills, or you get kicked out. So America is not a society that I fancy really living in again ever. Wow. Yes.
So like we said, on this show, everybody's story is unique. And we have learned from Mr. Jallow that he went to America, but not by choice. His heart was always in Gambia. He always knew that this is where he wanted to be. And despite, you know, the opportunities and the luxuries that the U.S. had to offer, he never could fit in because of the culture and the way people are. But knowing that you are going to come back and actually coming back is a different thing. So when we come back from the second break, we will talk about that decision. When did that decision hit you? And when did you know that, okay, now I'm ready, I'm going to go back, and what he did when he came back. So come back after the break. Welcome to the Gambia. This is where we call the Land of Smiling Coast. Okay, welcome back, viewers. Now we are on the last part of the show. This is where we answer the question why people come home, why people leave the West and decide to come home. So Mr. Jallow will ask you, we know from what you have previously said, you always knew you were going to come back home. America was never considered a home for you. So when and why and how did it finally hit you that you said, okay, now I'm ready, now the ground is ready, now I'm going back to Gambia?
Well, thank you very much. Like, you could tell from what I say. Yeah, so I was determined to come home, and I was going to come home once the dictatorship was over. But then, in the summer of 2017, as soon as the dictator was gone, I came for a brief holiday here, you know, for the first time in 17 years. And, you know, I got a call from the Minister of Justice then, Batambedo, and he said, Baba, we are planning on setting up a truth commission. And we've been looking around. We've looked at Gambian academia. We've looked at a lot of Gambians. And we think that, you know, you might be the best person to help us out with administering this commission. And, you know, so I'll give you a call later and we'll discuss it. So I said, yeah, fine. So I went back to the US to teach the semester, the fall semester, and I got a call again from Bar, and he said, now we've decided that we want you to come back and be the executive secretary, help us set up this commission and administer this truth commission that we are setting up. You know, if you are willing to do that, then we'll make you an offer. And I said, fine. And they made me an offer, and you know, so I came back by invitation of the government, if you like, of the Gambia, to come. I was going to come back anyway, but as the Wolof would say, Okabuta say gestola. So they asked me, invited me to come back, and they offered me this position, and I took it, and I helped set up this commission, and the rest, as they say, will become history. It's not yet history. It will become history at some point.
I think it's already history as of right now because we have all seen your work and the work of the TRRC. But that also must have been a dream come true because I can imagine 17 years in exile, not being able to see your parents, your mom passing and you not being able to come must have been very, very stressful. And the reason why this was all happening was because of the current government.
Yeah.
So to sit down and receive that phone call that tells you that we want you to be the executive secretary of the TRRC, which is going to look into the activities of the government that actually exiled you, that must have been something rewarding or fulfilling. Or let me ask you, what was that feeling like?
Well, it was so real. It was like, yes, as you put it, a dream come true. Because not only my mom, my dad too passed away. My mom passed in 2006, my dad 2009. I couldn't come to both of their funerals. And suddenly I get a chance to come and do precisely what I had always wanted to do, which is to make sure that the rights of, human rights of the people here are respected. You know, so the Truth Commission is all about investigating human rights, but also making sure that what happened here in the past doesn't happen again. So, yes, it was. I don't know how to describe it. You know, I wasn't excited. Like I don't jump at things like that. You know, I just. But I was grateful to God and grateful to Batambedo and the government that I was given this opportunity to come back and continue literally the work that I was doing. Because one thing that I never stopped doing was fight for human rights. And that's exactly what perhaps qualified me, because I never stopped writing. I went to the US. Throughout the period that I was in exile, I was criticizing Jammeh, I was writing about human rights abuses, and eventually I published a book. I don't know if you knew about that, Defying Dictatorship. You know, that is a collection of some of the writings that I had been doing while I was in exile. So now to be invited back to administer a commission that is looking into the human rights abuses of the previous regime, yeah, it was incredible. Yes, I think I was very, very happy. I was very happy. No regrets at all.
Wow.
Yes.
And how has that experience been? It's one thing to think about coming home, and you know, but it's another thing to actually come home and face the realities on the ground. So I'll make this question twofold. Coming home, what's life like been? You know, readjusting into Gambian culture, coming back, and also your work at the TRRC. What has that been like?
Yeah, I for the first part of your question, I found a Gambian culture that is different to some extent. You know, I thought there was more indiscipline in Gambian society than when I left. I thought that the effects of the dictatorship, you know, leadership creates culture. So if the leadership is brutal and chaotic and very callous, that culture of brutality and cruelty and callousness actually seeps down to the people, and indiscipline. So I was a bit shocked at the level of indiscipline. It still shocks me to see how rude and inconsiderate people are on the road, for example, while driving. You know, this was in the Gambia that I left. You know, so that certainly there is a culture shock that I face, even though I'm a Gambian. But I don't have any regrets coming back here. I prefer even a worse Gambia than it is now to America. So about my work, I'm just, you know, I'm happy. We set up the commission, and the commission has registered significant success. Yes, it's now considered a model for truth commissions around the world because of the comprehensive approach that we take. It's not just about the commissioners, but also we have various units, victim support, child, we include children and everything in the work. And I don't have any regrets. I think it's very fulfilling for me. It's very, very fulfilling. That's what I would say.
I think you guys are doing a wonderful job at the TRRC because you have been able to unearth or uncover a lot of things that we would never have known during this time if there was no TRRC, even after they left, because most of these were untraceable. But because of the TRRC, and I think the way it's been done, it's given people confidence to come and speak out, even to the extent of the junglers. Them coming out and speaking, about what they did, I think that was big, because they could have just refused not to say anything, even if they're going to be prosecuted. Let them be prosecuted, but they will not say anything. But I think the truth that has been coming out, or what has been said, it's a lot of healing for most Gambians and most people. So we would like to commend you and your team for that. And to conclude this show, I would like to ask you, what has been the most rewarding part of coming home, and what has been the most frustrating part of coming home? I know my questions are loaded. And then the last part would be, what advice or what would you say to Gambians like you and that live in the US that want to come home? They have the passion, but they are not sure about coming home. They're not sure about the hospitals. Will they get good medicine if they get sick? They're not sure about NAWEC. There's a lot of things that are bothering their mind that prevents them from coming home.
Well, the first part of your question was about
the best part and the worst part.
And the worst part of coming home. Well, let me start with the worst part. The worst part is having thousands of blackouts every day. It's frustrating, it's unacceptable, it's unhealthy for us to be having frequent blackouts. It's unacceptable. It's damaging psychologically for people to have to deal with 10 or more blackouts every day. That needs to be fixed. That's not acceptable. Very frustrating. And then there is the indiscipline and inefficiency that we see everywhere, bureaucratic inefficiency and red tape. Nothing seems to be working. We are an intelligent people. We should be above that level by now. I think that's the most frustrating part, the fact that people just do whatever they want, laissez-faire. How can we have blackouts every minute? That's not acceptable. That should change. That is just one of many frustrations I have, but that certainly tops the list right now. Look at our streets. They are all muddy pools, and this has been the case for forever, since we were kids. Why can't we pave our streets? Why can't we have street names and numbers? What is happening with all the monies that have been pumped into this country? So a lot needs to be done in this country, and Gambians should start just waking up and making sure that things are improved. We can't have blackouts 10 times a day. We are going backwards. This country is not moving forward. So that is one. In terms of the rewarding aspects of it is that I'm on the ground, the work at the TRRC is going well. I see a lot of potential. Gambia is not progressing because it's not progressing for lack of potential. We have a very vibrant and intelligent young population. And these people should be given the opportunities to move this country forward. If you look at our staff at the TRRC, we have about 100 staff. About 90 of them are below the age of 35. Everyone is a young person here, apart from some of us, and the commissioners. And they're doing a fantastic job. We haven't had any problems at all. So entrust the young people with responsibilities that they can do. Look at all the boys and girls sitting around, in the neighborhoods. Employ them, give them money, give them some training, let them build their streets. They can do it, with very little training and very little supervision. So that's what I would say to Gambians, that we really need to change our mentality. We need a mental revolution in this country. People need to start thinking in ways that enable us. And the current generation, the current administration, they should stop frustrating us with blackouts and everything else that is not going right. Look at the streets. The cars drive anyhow they want. People drive like cows. Like, a cow, if the cow wants to cross the street, it goes. It doesn't matter if a car is coming or not. That's precisely how people are driving here. We're behaving like cows. So for our brothers and sisters outside who are considering coming back but are afraid of the frustrations, I think this is home. I think they should come back. It's not all rosy out there either. They know, and we know. Some of us have lived in America for 17 years. It's not rosy. At least here you have your human dignity. You are not treated like a dog or a thief anywhere you go, in spite of your qualifications. You see in the news every time that black people are shot dead. You know, that's not a surprise. I mean, the white folks, even the black folks in America, a lot of them are racist towards Africans. You know, if you call an African American an African, they would be angry with you. They don't want anything to do with Africa. So there are difficulties here, yes, but I think that people should just come back and try to contribute to the betterment of our society for our future generation, because eventually, however long it takes, they will come back here. You know, they don't want to die in nursing homes, because there, if you are old, you don't live with your parents, they take you to a nursing home, you know, and leave you with some racist white people sometimes who will treat you like a piece of shit out there. You don't want that. So come back home, contribute to improving the lives of your people, and eventually, I think we'll overcome. So you can't force someone to come back, but I would encourage everyone who thinks that they can come back to really come back and do something. It's not going to be easy, but it's no more difficult than it is for people in America and Europe. Yeah, so.
Thank you, Mr. Jallow. I think we have learned a lot from your story and from your experiences. And again, like I said, we would like to thank you for all the job that you're doing with the TRRC. And we know that you continue to be a human rights advocate. Anybody, all you guys out there, you can follow him on Facebook. You can see some of his writings that he have been writing, which are very inspirational and educational. He's also an author. He had authored several books, the latest, which is this one, Growing Up in Chakubantang. So please go ahead and look for his books. They're all around. You can purchase them and read them, and I'm sure they will be a good source of inspiration. Until we come back your way next week, keep believing in your country, keep hope alive, and Gomal Sareo.